so we should all be live now. Good afternoon, colleagues, and welcome to the first virtual meeting of the full council since the COVID pandemic. I'm delighted that we are now able to meet in this virtual environment and undertake the business of the council on behalf of our residents. Today is an extraordinary meeting of the council which has been called to consider three specific items. The next ordinary meeting of the council will be held on the 30th of September, where members will see the usual agenda items at that meeting, prayers and various different things. I will also provide some details of how the Mayor's office has been responding during the pandemic at that meeting. Before I move on to formal business, for the benefit of those joining us today online, some may be for the first time, I would firstly like to introduce myself. I'm Councillor Charlie Keith, and I have the great honour of once again for the second term to be the Mayor of the Wakefield Metropolitan District, one of my duties of which as Mayor is to facilitate the full council meeting and chair it. I'm joined today by the Deputy Mayor, Councillor Tracy Austin, who I've spoken to earlier, alongside other members of the council representing all the 21 wards. I don't intend to read out names individually, other than to inform the meeting of those councillors who have submitted their apologies in advance of that meeting, as it would be if the meeting was being held in the council chamber. I am supported today by Gillian Marshall, the council's Chief Legal Officer. And it would, of course, be very remiss of me not to start today's meeting without saying an enormous thank you to everybody within the council for the continued hard work and commitment shown during these unprecedented and difficult times as the world responds to a global pandemic. As we see so often during emergency situations, the council staff really do step up to the challenge and continue to deliver and maintain essential services to all our residents. We've also been seeing some brilliant work done with our partners, including those staff within the NHS, in care homes, schools, the police, fire and ambulance, and other organisations, including those providing social care to our most vulnerable residents. And I would like to thank them all for their continued efforts. Councillor Mrs Jeffries, who is the leader of the council, would now like to say a few words. Councillor Jeffrey. Okay, you need to unmute yourself now, Denise. Okay, Denise, you're on. I'll come back to that then in a few moments' time. I want to come on now to some condolences, if I may. A lot has happened in the world since our last full council meeting in February, and I know we were all saddened to learn of the passing of our colleague and friend, Councillor Alan Wassell, who continued to serve the Normanton ward with great distinction to the end. I know that he is and will be continued to be sadly missed across the council chamber. I was also saddened to learn of the passing of our former colleague and charity worker, Councillor June Drysdale. This was alongside Dame Ingrid Roscoe, who was the former Lord Lieutenant of West Yorkshire, a long-standing friend of mine, Denton Jones, a long-standing town councillor and former Mayor of Normanton, and Christine Spencer, a long-standing chair of the South and West branch of the Royal British Legion. Our thoughts and prayers are with their families. Before we move on to the formal agenda items, I would like to confirm today's meeting's procedures. We will take each item on the agenda in order, copies of which have been provided to members and are also available on the council's website. I would remind colleagues to ensure that your microphone is on mute throughout the meeting unless invited by me to speak, to minimise the potential of background noise disrupting the broadcast and the meeting. If you wish to ask a question or a comment on any of the reports we are considering today, please indicate your wish to do so by typing a Q or a C into the comment box, and that will pop up on my screen. I would ask colleagues, however, to restrict instant messaging to typing Q or C only, and please, in this course of the meeting, do not type up anything else other than that. When invited to speak, unless please unmute your microphone and state your name before addressing the council. Please remute your microphone once you've finished speaking, and I'll remind you to do that. At the end of the debate on each item, I will seek confirmation from the meeting that it agrees to the proposed recommendations. And for the ease of managing the meeting, I intend to do this by asking each political group in turn to come up, followed by the Liberal Democrat member at the end. Now that concludes my announcement, but I do want to go back now and try and get Denise, who wanted to say a few words. Denise, if you would like to speak to us now. This is the Leader of the Council, Councillor Denise Jeffries.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Can you hear me?
I can, my dear. Thank you very much.
I don't know what went wrong there, but I'd just like to say, echoing your words about the staff and the people that work for this authority. They have been magnificent. They've stepped up to the plate and dealt with all the issues and looked after the people of this district. I don't know how we're going to thank them, but I'm sure we'll find a way, because they have been superb. They really have. Thank you.
I really do appreciate that. I'm sure they will do as well, Denise. I think speak for all the fellow councillors in all the different wards. It hasn't been one ward that more over any other. It's been across the board. It's been absolutely exemplary. That concludes my announcements, and I wish now to take agenda item 2, which is apologies for absence. Apologies have been submitted by councillors Mrs. Kitchen, Manifield, Stokes, Ward and Womersley, Councillor Stansby, Councillor Hunt and Councillor Loughran. And I've also understand that both Councillor Masterman and Councillor Shaw will have to leave the meeting early at around about 3:30. Are there any other further apologies? I think we've got everybody in, actually. Looking to those who's been checked in. Yeah. Item 3 on the council summons is to receive disclosures by members of interest in matters under consideration. Will members declaring an interest please identify themselves and their particular interest clearly and complete the usual yellow form before the end of the meeting. Firstly, colleagues, are there any disclosable pecuniary interests to be declared? I have none indicated, so I'm going to proceed on. Are there any significant other interests to be declared? I have none indicated, so I'm going to move on. Are there any other interests to be declared? I have none indicated, so thank you very much for that. Before we move on to the minutes, members will be aware that agenda item 7 contains an appendix which is exempt from publication. For the sake of it, the report itself is available for public inspection and has been published on the council's website. It is the appendix which contains the exemption information. I would therefore seek to move the following resolution: that the public and press be excluded from the meeting during the consideration of agenda item 7, appendix 1 only, if required, on the grounds that it is likely to involve the disclosure of exempt information as described in part 1 of the schedule 12A to the Local Government Act 1972 as amended. Is that seconded? Needs one of you to come off the mute.
Second that, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Tully. All in favour, and I will take your silence to be as confirmation of that. Okay, I take your silence to be confirmation, and that is carried. Agenda item 4 is to receive and confirm the minutes of the council meeting held on the 29th of January and 26th of February 2020. Seems years ago. Are these minutes moved?
Move the minutes, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. Are the minutes seconded?
Second the minutes,
Second them, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. Does anyone wish to vote against? I will take your silence as an indication that the minutes are approved as a correct record. I'm going to move on now to agenda item 5, which is to consider the detailed report given of the consultation of the governance review and mayoral scheme for a West Yorkshire Combined Authority. Is the report moved?
Move the report, Mr. Mayor.
Is the report seconded?
Second the report, Mr. Mayor.
I see that a number of colleagues.
Does the leader wish to speak to the report?
I've indicated, but before that, I'll go back to Councillor Mrs. Jeffries, the leader of the council, to speak on the report.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Cabinet considered the report this morning and agreed to submit the scheme subject to any views of the council. We said we would bring it back to council and give an opportunity for debate, and we have. We can only go with the proposal or reject it. We can't change the boundaries or the powers at this stage. Government want all combined authorities to have similar powers in future and may legislate for this with a white paper expected later this year. Debates on this report are also taking place in Kirklees, Calderdale and Bradford. Took place in Leeds yesterday, and Leeds Council endorsed the report. Just to give some background, this report backs the outcome of the recent consultation on devolution and asks us to agree to submit the scheme and response to the Secretary of State. As a reminder, devolution would bring a historic transfer of powers and investment from Whitehall to our region. It will give local control of at least 1.8 billion of funding to be spent on the things that matter to the people of West Yorkshire. The deal means decisions across key areas such as better transport, skills, the economy, housing and regeneration will all be taken in West Yorkshire. If the Secretary of State agrees that creating a mayoral combined authority will improve things in West Yorkshire, we will work with the government and bring back the final order to each council for approval in November. This will pave the way for a mayoral election in 2021. As I've said, all 5 authorities are taking the same report in the next few days ahead of the deadline for submission on the 11th of September. If we can get the scheme submitted and an order in place with an assurance framework, we could get the first lot of gain share funding this financial year, which will be worth 23 million. On the consultation online, it went online, we received over 4,000 responses, and that's more than double the response in any other combined authority consultation, even though COVID meant we couldn't do face-to-face events. Additional efforts were made to reach the digital disconnected through a target mail shot. In Wakefield, there were more positive responses overall than negative. We had only 492 responses, but there were more responses that were strongly opposed than strongly in favour. But when you add in the oppose or in favour, the numbers in agreement are higher overall in Wakefield than those opposed. It's not a brilliant response, I accept, but I'm not surprised. We couldn't consult in the way we would want to do, with having local meetings, etc., and engaging with people. And really, people have had more on their mind than whether we need another mayor, another politician. People have had to combat with COVID, and I think that really we haven't done too badly to say that we're in the middle of a pandemic. And colleagues will also be aware that Wakefield a few years ago voted not to have an elected mayor, and I've personally campaigned against one previously. But government have been clear. We can't have the deal without one. We will continue to champion the views of Wakefield residents and make sure we get our fair share of available funding to improve the lives of local residents. The control means that the new mayor cannot oppose things without our agreement. In conclusion, I would say, this is not the time for party politics, but ask you to consider whether this is the right thing for the region to help us move forward, including recovery from coronavirus. Mayoral combined authorities are the way forward for this government, and Wakefield and West Yorkshire must not be left behind. I hope you will all support the proposal. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you for that, Councillor Mrs Jeffrey. I'm going to take next as the seconder of the report, Councillor Hemingway.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. Yeah, I speak in support of the recommended option 1, and I urge all the members of Council to endorse these proposals also. The devolution deal is clearly supported by the consultation responses, both from residents and stakeholder groups, and as a council we should give our assent to go forward to the Secretary of State with our support. After years of austerity, we need the significant funding set out in the deal, and this is a once-in-a-generation opportunity that we must seize for the benefit of Wakefield. For too long have powers and funding been concentrated in Whitehall and Westminster, and a move towards greater regional coordination is certainly in my view a step in the right direction. We'll have seen over the last few months the way in which the Mayor of Greater Manchester has been able to stand up for the North West with a single clear voice. I think West Yorkshire needs similar representation as a whole, so we'll represent at a national level and can fight for our fair share in a more effective way. Another point to add is also on climate change. The deal represents a significant opportunity to put large-scale investment into a transition to a green economy, plans for a mass transit network, increased cycle opportunities. There's all kinds of funding in there that could really help our district and our region to achieve carbon neutrality and more sustainable public transport. So I would just say, let's not miss the chance for funding for our districts and powers for the region, and let's approve and support this deal. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Hemingway. I know two councillors will wish to speak on this, but first of all I'm going to take Councillor Ahmed as leader of the Conservative group and ask him if he would like to respond, and then I will take each question in order as they appear on my comment box on the screen. Councillor Ahmed.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. I think we've been waiting a long time for the devolution deal, and there's been ongoing conversations. So in terms of the people of Wakefield did actually originally vote against what was what would have been elected mayor, and it was roughly around 37% of people voted in favour of having a mayor, and that was, that was bigger turnout than the consultation that was carried out by the council. But I think as it's a policy that I think will benefit the people of Wakefield and the wider West Yorkshire region with investment in there, but it's important that Wakefield it takes a lead within the authority, within the combined authority itself, and presents itself in order to make sure that we don't lose out to Leeds being the larger authority in there. And that's one of my main concerns with the devolution deal, the effect of Leeds, and often the use of words like Leeds, city, region, etc., and other things. It's important that we fight for the people of Wakefield who are elected to serve. But I think the devolution deal does present us with a great opportunity to, particularly that we didn't plan this when COVID was happening, but COVID has happened, and there's a large number of people in our district who are going to be affected in terms of employment chances. So it's important that we bid for Wakefield and create the employment opportunities here, and we make best use of this process here. But there is two real objections that I do have to this, and this was also raised in Leeds as well by the Conservative group there as well, and it was agreed by the Labour group at that point. I think Councillor Jeffries has mentioned that we can't make changes to the powers, but I think it's important that we address certain issues such as planning, which is currently determined within Wakefield, and our spatial strategy in terms of Greenbelt and what we decide is building land or not. I would feel uncomfortable with that passing over to a mayor in that sense, who might not be from our district. We're not sure at this moment in time when the election does take place. So I think it's important, and it was agreed within Leeds, that is an area that I felt should, and I think many of the other members will feel, that should be determined by us in the local area. We understand our area, we know the area, the planning committee, itself is there for that purpose. We have officers who make these decisions, and we would like that to remain within elected councils within Wakefield rather than devolving over to a mayor itself who might be making decisions that might not be in benefit of Wakefield or our surrounding areas in the district. The second thing that I think is important is there is enough taxation burden on people across our district, whether that be council tax, VAT, or whatever there is. And I've always believed in a lower tax. Low tax. And I think it's important that we send out a message to anybody who takes on the position of mayor and the leaders that are currently going to serve on that mayor authority, that we do not want additional taxation, unnecessary burdens placed on people, but a good, efficient use of monies rather than adding to the taxation burden that people have. So overall, it's important that we address our concerns at this stage. And I think it's important that we make people aware of them. So I'm not against devolution. I've always supported the idea of massive powers that are currently held in central government passing over to the local region. This is the start. I don't think it's the end process. I think devolution is the first stage of powers passing over, and I'm hoping that more powers do pass over, so decision making is done for our area within the region rather than being dictated by London. Thank you very much, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you for that, Councillor Ahmed. Any other members wishing to speak on the subject? If you wish to put, you want to make a comment up on the screen, or you want to have a point of clarification, whatever, if you could indicate now. I've got one come up from Councillor Gordon. Councillor Gordon, if you'd like to unmute yourself and speak now.
Yeah, so in terms of I've got sort of 3 points that I'd like to address, really. The first being that the way in which the consultation itself was run. I find it a little bit hypocritical of the council to insist that this is a valid and legitimate consultation that has gone on, when I raised the issue of a local area master plan consultation for my ward in Nottingham and was told by council officers it wouldn't be a valid response and we would exclude people if we were to carry out a consultation as a council during a pandemic. So the mental gymnastics which have been done here to allow one consultation to be valid and the shirking off of another is quite admirable in that respect. Not only that, the way in which it was run, the questions for those of you who completed the consultation were incredibly biased. Would you accept this if it was a condition? The questions were ultimately leading and pushed people down the narrow tract where they were told they would only see investment if they agreed with it. This was a consultation designed with an answer in mind. It's disappointing. As a Liberal Democrat, one of the things that I was proudest to see in the general election was our commitment to the idea of a Yorkshire Parliament and giving proper devolution rather than just a metro mayor deal. I think the other issues that I've had with the way in which this has been run is the way in which we have looked at the responses. It's all right saying that overall in Wakefield there was a majority in favour, but why are we giving equal weighting to answers which were not equal in themselves? The idea that you can tot up the number of strongly opposed and people who didn't want it and equalise that with the number of strongly in favour and in favour in general, and that they're analogous. What is the entire point of having a varying degree and a strength of indication in a response if no weighting is given to that? On every single question through this consultation, bar one, strongly opposed won the day. Yet we've now decided that that would be inconvenient for Wakefield, so we're going to push this through anyway. And with 400 people out of a region, out of a local authority with hundreds of thousands of people, to make such a drastic change and something that will unlikely ever be undone on the basis of 400 responses is just absolutely, it pales. When you think about the fact that there are 63 councillors, if every single councillor has filled this out and every single councillor's family or partner or whatever, then we're not looking much further than just ourselves. We're speaking to ourselves. My concern pushing this through will ultimately lead to disappointment and further disillusionment with the public about politicians. If anyone, any candidate of any party or independent stands on a platform of saying that this deal will revolutionise or change the way or have a fundamental life-altering consequences for residents of this district, I think we will only find people will be disappointed. The total sum of 1.8 billion over 30 years equates to just £7 million per local authority if distributed equally per year. We as a local authority have had to make cuts more than double the size of this. I'd much rather see investment in local government over giving money to a mayor to fund pet projects in Leeds. The issues that my Conservative colleague raised about planning, I share those views, and also, again, would urge, going forward, that other political parties, the Labour group and the Conservative group, try to pressure any candidate to commit to not setting a mayoral precept. When I was out delivering a newsletter last month on a former council estate in my ward, residents were coming out to me in the street to tell me that they were against the idea of a mayor because they just can't afford to pay any more. It would be completely morally bankrupt of us to impose further financial hardship on people who are already. So I will be voting against this, accepting the report. I do want to see proper devolution, and this deal, like I've said, doesn't cut it for me. Whoever is elected will have their hands tied by the 5 leaders of local authorities who aren't elected. The Police and Crime Commissioner will be replaced by a party political appointment, and we've already said no to a directly elected mayor before. So on that basis, as much as I'd love to see something great for this area, I don't think this is it.
Thank you very much for that, Councillor Gordon. If you can pop your mute button back on for me there. Are there any other councillors wish to speak or make a comment on the report? If not, oh yeah, I've got Samantha Harvey come up to me. Samantha, if you like to unmute yourself and speak to the meeting now.
Thank you, Mayor. Just a very short question to ask the leader of the council. How can we be reassured that the actual resources available through the devolution deal itself will be spent effectively to secure the regeneration of Wakefield? Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
If you can bob yourself, thank you. If you can bob yourself back on mute for me, Samantha, that'd be lovely. Up next, I've got Councillor Steve Tully. If you'd like to unmute yourself, Steve.
Yeah, I mean, in an ideal situation, nobody wanted it. We would much prefer to continue as we are. But I think, as the leader has said quite clearly, going forward, the only way we're going to be able to get investment into our area is the only deal that's on the table. And I have some great concerns about consultation, and we've all been in a situation we've been stuck down with this pandemic, and it wouldn't have been as good as it could have been under normal time. But I just wondered, when Councillor Tom Gordon was dishing his leaflets out, his newsletters, and they were all coming out in the droves to him to tell him that they didn't want a mayor because they couldn't afford one, why they didn't bother filling in consultation while they were asked as well if they were so enthusiastic about not having a mayor. But that's just a general comment that I make. But by and large, I mean, we have voted against a directly elected mayor before. I think as a party we've moved towards wanting devolution and a deal for Yorkshire. It's the best we're going to get on the old West Yorkshire Leeds City region footprint that we wanted. I have my reservations about planning, as other people have pointed out. I think the situation that we find ourselves in at the moment, we've got very little room to manoeuvre other than to make sure that we get the best deal for Wakefield, and our leadership at Wakefield remain on the top table. So as we've previously said, and we do our fighting for the people of Wakefield and the people that we represent.
Thank you for that, Councillor Tully. Put yourself back on mute, if you will. Councillor Jeffrey and Councillor Hemingway, heads up to you. I'm going to be coming back to answer one or two of the questions and giving you a chance to reply to these, but I've got a couple more people indicated with questions, so I'll come back after we've had the questions, starting with the next question from Councillor Olivia Rowley. Olivia, if you'd like to unmute yourself.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Some of us have been around so long that we remember the county council and the fact that we had numerous elected members, and I actually think they did an extremely good job. But of course, the Tories abolished it in 1986. We've now got a situation where most of us have reservations about this new arrangement. But basically, it's a Hobson's choice, isn't it? We refuse it, we don't get the money, and then legislation will follow later that ensures that it happens anyway. And so we're in a situation where reluctantly I think that we're going to have to agree to it, and I can understand the reservations of our electorate and the apathy, really, but basically we've got to make it work despite it being a Tory legislation, because it's the only opportunity in town. I think the issue about planning, I have mixed feelings about it, because we've already seen consultation happening at the moment that will negate virtually anything we can do as a council in relation to planning. So if it's felt so strongly that we have control of it in Wakefield, let's put our point of view that we want actually tighter legislation and stricter rules around planning, and not the laissez-faire that the government are currently advocating. So, you know, we need to highlight that and say that we if we want planning, we want it to be worthwhile. I think Councillor Gordon's comments, some of them are of significance, but unfortunately we don't live in an ideal world, and it's going to be forced upon us either way. Thank you.
Thank you for that, Councillor Rowley. If you could remute yourself, that would be fine. I'm taking next Councillor Matthew Morley.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Mr. Mayor, when we make reference to when we actually had a referendum back in 2012, I believe it was, and a significant majority of the district voted to not have a directly elected mayor or leader, as it was, it's a completely different scenario as to what we are in now. This directly elected mayor has come with a significant amount of funding for Wakefield and for West Yorkshire, and we've seen since the creation of the Combined Authority since 2014 that we've seen a great amount of investment come into Wakefield through that. That transport fund that was set up is coming to the end, and we've got more major schemes that we want to do for infrastructure, and where will it be funded by? It is the only deal is to have a mayor. It is one extra politician. I would absolutely dread to go down the road that the Liberal Democrats are proposing, that we have a fully fledged Yorkshire Parliament, what's costing, will have, you know, a massive amount of new politicians. God knows how much it will cost, and God knows how many salaries. It's just absolute sheer nonsense and folly. Obviously, Councillor Gordon won't be the Lib Dem candidate. He must have already been ruled out. That's probably why he's opposing it. I think this is where politics need to stop. We need to come together and support investment. We have been so strained with investment in this area over the last 10 years with the cuts that the Lib Dems and the Conservatives started, that we desperately need it now, and this is the only game in town, and I do support it. I want to see investment into my area. I don't want to see any more cuts that we're going to make. So, Mr. Mayor, I do support these proposals.
Thank you very much, Councillor Morley. If you could remute yourself, that would be lovely. Up next, I want to take a comment from Councillor Jackie Spade.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'd just like to say that I too am disappointed with the consultation results. They were not what we would have wished, any of us. However, I like to think that had there been very significant and serious opposition, that that would have come through. I think people are just showing a level of apathy, really, rather than great opposition. But I would, Councillor Morley's just touched on it, and I would be interested to know, although he probably can't respond, is that is Councillor Gordon telling us that there's not going to be a Lib Dem, that Lib Dems are so opposed to a West Yorkshire devolution that they won't stand a candidate in the mayoral elections, and if they do, does that mean that he won't be campaigning for them?
Okay, thank you very much, Councillor Spate. If you'd like to remute yourself there. Are there any other comments from any other councillors? If not, I'd like to come back to Councillor Mrs. Jeffrey, if you'd like to respond to any of those questions that you've been asked.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Mayor. With regards to Nadim's planning issue, yes, it is an issue, but there is also already a veto in there that we can deal with. But following on from Olivia's point that I was going to make, planning is up in the air anyway. So whether it actually gets through, that we'll lose all our powers for planning being taken away from us. So I think that we can say that we are concerned about the planning issue, and we can look at that. But I really don't think, Nadim, that there is a need to, because it's already in the criteria. With regards to Sam Harvey, my track record for regeneration across this district since 1995, when I first took over regeneration, goes without saying. I fought for everything for this district, and we have a lot to show for it. And if we hadn't have had the austerity that your government had brought in, we'd have had a lot more. But we are moving forward. We do need this funding. We can't manage without it. If we say no to this deal and it falls apart, legislation will be imposed on us, but without the funding. And I would say to Councillor Gordon, well, what a surprise. You're always Harry opposite. Anything that the rest of us, Conservatives or the Labour group, want to do, you're a one-man band, so you can say what you like and you've no responsibility. Yes, I take your point about the consultation, but we're in a COVID situation. We've done our absolute best to consult with people. I don't know about your issue with Nottingham Master Plan. That's perhaps something we can take up later. You've never raised that with me, though you do tend to raise a number of other issues. So I think that we move forward with this. It is the best deal. It's not ideal, but it's not what we want. We don't want another politician. Nobody does. But we've got to go with this because we do need the funding for our district. And I think that the leaders of the West Yorkshire Combined Authority will fight to get everything we can for West Yorkshire. And so I urge you all to vote for this.
Okay, thank you for that, Councillor, Leader of the Councillor Mrs. Jeffrey. I've got both Steve Tully and Samantha wanting to come back, but I'm afraid you've had one go at it already, and I'm been told that that's the one go you get. So unless there's somebody who hasn't spoken before,
can we move to the vote, please?
Thank you, Steve. Yeah. So we're going to move to that now, Steve. Thank you very much. I will take the matter to the vote. For the ease of managing the meeting, as I referred to in my announcements, I will ask each individual political group in turn, before asking the Liberal Democrat member, whether you wish to vote for or against the recommendations, or whether you wish to abstain. Firstly, I'm turning to the controlling Labour group members only. Please turn on your microphones and state clearly if you wish to vote against the recommendations. I have not heard any response. Please speak if you want to abstain against voting from the recommendations. As no member of the controlling group has indicated to me that they've voted against the recommendations or have abstained, I will take that all the members of the controlling Labour group are in favour of the recommendations. And I will take your silence as confirmation. If not, please indicate now. Thank you. We now move on to the Conservative group. Please turn on your microphones. The Labour group people can all put theirs back on mute. We'll go on to the Conservative group, and please turn on your microphones and state clearly if you wish to vote against the recommendations. Carl Johnson has indicated something. Have you indicated that you want to vote against the recommendations, Carl? I'll take that to say that it was just a matter of just turning on your microphone. Please make yourself plain to me, Conservative group members only, if you wish to abstain from the recommendation, from voting on the recommendations. As no member has indicated they have voted, a Conservative group have voted against the recommendations or have abstained, I will take that all the members of the Conservative group are in favour of the recommendations. If not, speak now, please. I will take that as confirmation that you're voting for it. Thank you. Finally, I will now ask the Liberal Democrat member, Councillor Gordon, could you please turn on your microphone and state clearly if you wish to vote against the recommendations?
Against.
Against. Okay. Thank you for your patience, members. The recommendations as set out in the report are therefore carried. Thank you. If you could all put yourself back onto mute, and I'll invite you to speak on the next agenda item, which is agenda item 6. and it's to consider a report which seeks the approval of a corporate director post. Is the report moved?
Yes, the report is moved, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. Is the report seconded?
Second the report, Mr. Mayor.
Again, can I see some of the colleagues, if you wish to indicate want to have a question in relation to the report? Would Councillor Mrs. Jeffrey like to speak on the report?
Yes, I think as colleagues would expect, we are, my deputy leader and myself and cabinet are looking at making changes across the council, and because of our real interest and effort in climate change, we're wanting to create a new corporate director for communities, environment and climate change, and not to waste any money, we want to delete the post of business change director who has actually left the authority. So we're asking for support today to create the new director post, which won't cost us any more money, but it will be strengthening what we wish to do with our agenda for climate change.
Thank you for that, Councillor Mrs. Jeffrey. As seconder of the report, Councillor Hemingway, would you like to add your comments?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Just to say I agree with the leader's statement. I think the creation of this post will really assist with our efforts on climate change in the environment and reflects the focus that the Council's administration has placed upon this issue. So just to say that and second the proposal.
Thank you, Councillor Hemingway. One or two people have indicated they want to speak, but just ask Councillor Ahmed if he would like to respond, and then I'll take any question in order as they appeared on my comment box on the screen. Councillor Ahmed, would you like to make any comment?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I will make a comment. I think in terms of the conversation, I know it's one of the Council's priorities for climate change, but I just think at this moment in time that the changes within the Council structure should really take place with a new chief executive and with a new position in there. And I'm assuming that this change was done prior to the pink papers being published. So not sure if it's the right time at the moment. I think the priorities of the people of the district, although climate change is important, and I'm sure I know Councillor Hemingway's one of the things that he's looking into, but I feel at this moment in time that we should be looking at job creation and alleviating difficulties that people are having within the district in terms of poverty, employment, education. And at the moment, I think climate change is not one of my personal priorities. And I think if I was to ask people in the district, it would not be, it was something that I feel that within the portfolios or within the council leadership, it could be done elsewhere rather than creating an additional post. I know it's at the expense of the other post that's been removed. I mean, I believe communities are important, environment is important, and so is climate change. So I don't want to speak against any of them issues, but I just feel at this moment in time it's the wrong priority and it's the wrong conversation that we're having. And pretty much similar to devolution is something that most people in the district would not be speaking about at the moment. If this post was to look at business, taxation, or creating employment or life skills, I would be totally in favour of it. But I don't think it's the right time to bring in these posts in at the moment. And that's I think that's the view of the people in the district as well. Thank you for that, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Ahmed. Councillor Jeffrey, if you'd like to try and remute yours at the moment, because you're showing me that you're not muted at the moment. I'll go on to take at least three of the councillors who have indicated they wanted to speak, starting with Councillor Olivia Rowley.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. It's good to speak after Councillor Ahmed because I can indicate, first of all, my frustration with the government who seem to do absolutely nothing about climate change. Secondly, I think it's the most important thing to actually come to our agenda because it affects all of us and our future and our health. And certainly, if it's done properly, it will create employment. And that's what we need, are green jobs. So I really feel that this is a fantastic opportunity to put Wakefield on the map in terms of being a lead in climate change and also to actually take it seriously, inform the public, get us all on board, be really enthusiastic because it's really, really important. It's a great appointment.
Thank you for that, Councillor Rowley. If you can remute yourself. I'm going to take next Councillor Steve Tully.
Yeah, I'm in agreement with what Councillor Rowley just said, and I'm probably going to speak with a little bit of a vested interest here for myself and my neighbouring wards, that we're in the process of looking at a vast range of environmental projects within Ward 14 South Emsall, within Emsworth, within Upton and North Emsall, and I believe they've also been looking at some projects over in Ossett as well. It's where we're going to be, it's going forward. It's about a green environment, it's about making sure we leave this place a far better place than we found it for our children and our grandchildren going forward. And if we want to be the leading councils that can be promoting climate change and green jobs, I'm all for it, and I would recommend to the council today that we move this report and take it to the vote.
Thank you for that, Councillor Tully. Up next, we've got Councillor Samantha Narby.
Thank you, Mayor. I'd like to ask a question about in WICA, which is the West Yorkshire Combined Authority. Do we have any corporate director role for any other authority? This is what I like to know. Why do we need to create one while the other 4 local authority in the West Yorkshire devolution deal don't have one? And the other issue is, if we are actually having an outgoing chief exec, and should we not wait for the new chief exec to come in to see what she or he would like the senior management team look like, instead of making the serious change to our management structure of the council at this moment of time? And the last point is, due to COVID-19, would we not be able or be direct this funding to probably COVID-19 recovery plan, recovery funding, to a service director in that effect at this moment of time, to find a director of £127,000 just on climate change itself? Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you for that, Councillor Harvey. If you can remute yourself. Heads up to Councillor Tully or Councillor Hemingway or Councillor Mrs. Jeffrey. I'll get answers to those questions after we've had the final question on my board from Councillor Thomas.
Yes.
Gordon, sorry.
It's all right. I get that quite often. No, it was just to say, I think the creation of a post that's specifically looking at this is great. Going back a year and a bit now, at my first council meeting, we obviously had on the order paper the declaration of a climate emergency, and I think this obviously needs that follow through, and it's a natural progression, as it is the biggest issue of the day. My only sort of query and question would be just in regards to I know this is one of those tricky issues. I can't really dance about it. In terms of, what does a council do, or do we look at pay ratios between our lowest earners and our highest earners? Because to me, when you see a salary of £127,000, it's just shy of what the Prime Minister's earning. Do you know what I mean? It's best part of what the PM's earning. And does a director at Wakefield Council have the same level of responsibility? And how do we justify that? And like I say, I know other organisations have pay ratios, and is that something that we have done before, could look at, and just sort of like trying to get to grips with that sort of that side of things?
Okay, thank you, Councillor Gordon. Once again, sorry for calling you Councillor Thomas there, it comes up on my screen. So on to the next question is Councillor Maureen Cummins.
It's actually a comment, Mr. Mayor, and it's around what Councillor Harvey has just said. It isn't just about climate change. Communities and environment is an absolutely massive portfolio, particularly communities, and what we are and have been going through over the last 6 months. It's become massive as communities. It's become massive with volunteers, and so it isn't just this. The executive director is not just about climate change. Climate change fits so well into that directorate. And I just want to address something that Councillor Gordon has just said. When you talk about salaries within for these positions, Councillor Gordon, I point you in the direction of Richmond-on-Thames and the City of York, both Liberal Democrat controlled councils who pay much more than what's on the table here. Thank
you very much for that, Councillor Mrs. Cummins. Councillor Mrs Jeffries, as leader, could you respond to some of those questions and make any comments you've got to make? I think you're still on mute, Denise. If you could unmute yourself there. Oh, she's back. She's back. Okay, you're all right. No. Okay, Denise, it's over to you. Okay, I'm coming to Councillor Hemingway. If you could stand in and just answer some of those questions while we get Denise back onto the line, please.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Yeah, I think Councillor Cummings has summed it up very well. This post isn't just about climate change, it's about communities, it's about the environment. It's a very large department of the council which commands significant responsibility, and the salary is commensurate with posts of that nature. I think really it's about showing a bit of leadership on the climate issue and making sure that we made a declaration to achieve net zero by 2030. If we don't have the right team and officer support and structures in place to deliver that, then it's just words on the wind. So this is part of achieving that long-term climate goal. And if we don't make the changes that are necessary at some stage, then we're not going to be able to hit that. I'll also just pick up on what Councillor Ahmed stated regarding our focus on the pandemic. We already have a number of, we've got the recovery board, which itself sits on, we've got officers working on dedicated officer teams in response to COVID, and the work there has been carried out absolutely brilliantly over the last few months. So I don't think it's fair to suggest that the council's still not focusing on responding to the pandemic. I think we are, and I think we're doing a very good job with it as well. Thank you.
Thank you for that, Councillor Hemingway. Just to have a comment up on the screen here that Councillor Tully says, I agree, it's not just about climate change. I think that's the point that Councillor Maureen Cummings made. Councillor Mrs Jeffrey, would you like to come back in and make any comments yourself?
Yes, can you hear me? I'm sorry about this.
No worries.
I'm not brilliant at IT, I think, as most of you have gathered. I think Jack has adequately covered most of what we're saying, but Nadine, when you said about we didn't have anyone dealing with skills and business, we already have a corporate director for regeneration skills. This is so much more of what we want to do, and we have to move things forward. And as under a new leadership with Jack and myself and the cabinet, this is the way forward that we want to do, and we are keeping it tight. We are looking at the right skills, and we feel that this is the right way to go and the right thing to do. And I think Maureen's answered Tom Gordon's comments about the salaries. So I think we're up to date on that. Thank you.
Thank you for that, Councillor Jeffrey. I'd now take the matter to the vote, please. If I've not just looked up York Council, and the highest salary paid is to corporate director is £117, £1,000. I would have thought, yeah. So that's from Councillor Gordon. I will now take the matter to the vote, and we'll adopt the same process as in the previous agenda item, if that's okay. Firstly, to the controlling Labour group members only. Please turn your microphones on and state clearly if you wish to vote against the recommendations. Okay, nobody's made any noises. Please state clearly now if you wish to abstain against the recommendations. No noise has been made to me. As no members of the controlling group have voted against the recommendations or have abstained, I will take this that all members of the controlling Labour group are in favour of the recommendations. I will take your silence as confirmation. If not, please indicate now. Thank you.
Can I request a point of order, please?
Who's this?
It's Councillor Gordon. I'd just like for Councillor Cummings to retract the libellous claims, because in Richmond as well, the only person who's paid over 125 appears to be the chief exec. So if the fact that she made the claim that other councils that are Lib Dem run pay more than that post, if she could retract that claim that is inaccurate, that'd be great.
Can I just say that I've been informed by my legal to my left that it's not a point of order. I don't know whether it would change people's voting. But Councillor Cummins, I'm going to give you a chance to reply. Councillor Cummins, answer me once, please.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Yes, I took myself to the Richmond upon Thames website last night, and there are 6 directors there. The highest paid is £177,000. That's what's on the site, and that's where I got the information. The population of Richmond is around the 196,000 mark, and the population of York is again around 198,700. And if you prorata the payments, you will find that as far as pence per head is concerned, it's considerably, the pay is considerably more, and that was my point.
That wasn't your point. You didn't mention pence per head, and population doesn't factor into the quote from the thing that you came out with, Maureen.
Thank you. Let's not argue on who's got the maths right now. It's a point being made, and if anybody wants to dispute those, please go onto the relevant websites and look it up yourself. I'm halfway through taking a vote on this, and I'm to the point where that the controlling Labour group are all in favour of the recommendations. Only councillors who are in the Labour group should have their microphones off of mute. Rest of you should be on mute. Anybody who doesn't agree with this statement, I take in your silence as confirmation that you are voting for this recommendations. Please indicate now if you're voting against. Thank you for taking all the members of the controlling Labour group are in favour of the recommendations. I'm now going to move on to the group. Please turn on your microphones. Labour group having turned yours back to mute. Let the Conservative group turn on your microphones and state clearly if you wish to vote against the recommendations.
Against.
Against. Yeah.
Against.
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 So I have a number of ones wanting to vote against. So I'm going to have to go through them and get in them individually. Is that okay?
Unless, Mr. Mayor, you just ask if anybody wishes to vote for or abstain. Otherwise, we'll take it.
Okay, then I'll take it the other way around. So the Conservative group, is there anybody wishing to vote for the recommendations? I'll take that silence to mean no. Are you anybody in the Conservative microphone on wishing to abstain? Please make yourself known now. So I will take it that all the members of the Conservative group wish to vote against that recommendation. If I've got that wrong, please make a noise now. So all the Conservative group members, thank you for put yourself back on mute. I'm taking that you're voting against it. And finally, can I ask the Liberal Democrat member, Councillor Gordon, if you'll turn your microphone on and please state clearly if you wish to vote for or against the recommendations.
For.
You wish to vote for, yeah? Thank you, Councillor Gordon. Thank you for that. The recommendations are set out in the report are therefore carried. Thank you very much for participation there. I'll go back on to mute and we'll start again with the next agenda item, which is item 7, which is to consider a report on senior management structure. I would remind members that Appendix 1 of this report contains exempt information, and if members wish to raise any questions on the appendix or refer to its content, then we need to move the meeting to a private session. Moved. Still waiting for somebody to move the report.
Oh, move the report, Mr. Mayor.
Okay. Is the report seconded?
Second the report, Mr. Mayor.
Again, I see that some colleagues might have indicated to wish to ask the question in relation to the report, but firstly I'm going to go straight to Councillor Ahmed as leader of the Conservative group and ask... Sorry, right. So I've got to... I'm following my script here, sorry about that. Councillor Mrs Jeffrey, would you like to speak on the report?
Well, I think the report is self-explanatory, and I don't want to go into too many details. We all know that our chief executive has had some health problems, and I feel that this is the right way to go for her and for the council. So the recommendation is set out in 3.1. I don't wish to go into any detail, but obviously Maren has expressed the wish to take retirement because of her health, and I think that we should accept that and support her.
Couldn't agree more. Councillor Hemingway, a seconder of that report, would you like to make any comment?
Just to echo the leader's sentiments, Mr. Mayor, and to thank Maren for her service. I'm sure I'll have an opportunity to do that at a later stage, but that's all at this point, Mr. Mayor. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Councillor Hemingway. If you can go back onto mute. So we're coming back onto the script now, and I'd like to ask Councillor Ahmed if he would like to respond, and then I will take each question in order as they appear on the comment box on my screen. Councillor Ahmed.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I think as the report has outlined, I think you've mentioned that we can't refer to items within report. Is that right?
I'll just check that with my legal.
It's the detail of the appendix they're exempt, Mr. Mayor.
It's the details of the appendix which is exempt. So are you allowed to make any comments other than there's anything to do with that?
Yes, Mr. Mayor.
You are. Did you hear that, Councillor Ahmed?
I did, Mr. Mayor. Thank you for that. I think that's my point there. So I think it's obviously Maren. I don't want to go into details, but I think Maren's would always wish her the best in recovery in there as well. And this is the decision that the council's reached with the chief executive, and it's obviously come to the council because it has to. But obviously, I do have a number of concerns about the timings of the decision, but I also understand the nature and the sensitivities around the topic as well. And it is a confidential item, and obviously there's settlement agreements to be agreed within the document as it mentions on there. But I do have some concerns, but I will leave them at this moment in time. I think it's important that, as the chief executive has expressed an interest to go on early retirement, I think we need to respect that, and the decision behind it as well, to respect that as well. And I'm surprised it's come to the council, but there must be a reason for that, so I will leave it there.
Thank you for that, Councillor Ahmed. Are there any other councillors wishing to make a comment on or enter into the debate on the report on item number 7 on the agenda? If not, I will now take the matter to the vote. Firstly, to the controlling Labour group, very similar to what we've done before. Controlling Labour group only, please turn on your microphones and state clearly if you wish to vote against the recommendations. Okay, make a noise now if you wish to abstain voting against the recommendation, please. Let me know. As no member of the controlling group have voted against the recommendations or have abstained, I will take this that all the members of the controlling Labour group are in favour of the recommendations. I will take your silence as confirmation. If not, please indicate now. Thank you. Please, if the Labour group people can all put themselves back onto mute. We are now going to move to the Conservative group. Please turn on your microphones and state clearly if you wish to vote against the recommendations. Okay, please state now if you wish to abstain from voting against the recommendations.
Abstain.
Can I take that to say that everybody in the Conservative group wishes to abstain? Please make a note.
Yes.
Yeah, please make a noise now if you do not wish to abstain. Please, Conservative group, make a noise now if you wish to vote for. Okay, so I will take it that all the members of the Conservative group will be registered as an abstention on that vote. And I will take your silence as indication of that. Thank you. Finally, Councillor Gordon, could I please turn to you, turn your microphone on, and clearly if you wish to vote for or against the recommendations, or if you wish to abstain.
Abstain.
You will abstain as well. Thank you very much. So those recommendations are set out in the report, carried. And colleagues, that was the last item on the agenda. Thank you for your attendance at Wakefield's first ever virtual council meeting. I would like to place on record my thanks to those officers who have worked so hard to make this possible. And I know there has been much work undertaken behind the scenes, which is greatly appreciated by us all. Can I remind members that we'll return to the next ordinary meeting, which will be the usual things with portfolio holders, prayers, and bringing you up to date with what I've done since away, and that will be held on the 30th of September. And so all that remains for me to do is to say keep safe, keep well, keep kind, and from all of us here in Wakefield 1, good afternoon.